Hey, welcome back to the Jesus Magnet podcast. We are your hosts, Joel and Laura Hillary. We are now in Wellington, and we have come to an amazing place. It is terrible weather here in Wellington, but we're joined today with Richelle. How you doing, Richelle?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks, Joel.
Yeah?
Yeah.
And Richelle has, we came up and saw Richelle 2 days ago, and one of the cool things that we realised was how many things you have in common with my parents.
Yeah, it was uncanny.
Yeah. So they have a cat, which is a tabby cat called Tiger. My parents have a tabby cat called Tiger. They have a little dog called Billy. My parents have a little dog called Billy. And your husband, Vincent, is an architectural designer, and so is my dad.
No,
and I'm sure my mum's second profession of choice would have been a florist, but she was a school teacher.
It's a bit weird, isn't it?
It is quite cool, actually. And it's just such a nice way to meet you. You know, we connected with you through, who was that in Wanaka, Laura?
It was Gabby who we met in Wanaka.
Yeah, so shout out Gabby. Thank you for connecting us. And so nice to meet you and to be welcomed into your home, and that you're bold and ready to share your testimony. And so we'll just pass it over to you, Richelle. You can start wherever you want. We'll jump in and out with questions.
Thank you.
But
Yeah, it's great to meet you guys too. My testimony, I have never actually sat down and written it out or, thought about it in great depth, but it's quite good to be able to share it.
Yeah.
And if I could say one thing about my life, to sum it all up, it would be that my life is a testament to the faithfulness of God.
That's
Amen.
Cool.
Yeah, and right through my life, I've just seen it again and again. So, it's good to be able to share my story, and hopefully it will encourage somebody. I'll tell you my story.
Let's go.
Yeah, I grew up in a family that, until the age of me being about 8 years old, they weren't Christians. My mother was on the quest to find the meaning of life, and my father, who was a pilot, lived a life to all on the outside looking in. He seemed to be a very sort of a suave, charming, and very smooth sort of a guy. However, in reality, he really wasn't. He was, I guess, what you'd call a serial adulterer with a really bad temper, and we grew up very fearful of his outbursts. I guess you could say we grew up with domestic violence. We moved around a lot, with Dad being stationed in different cities, and we had a brief stint of about 6 months in Wellington, which is where we are now, when I was about 6, before my mother finally had enough of Dad's affairs and the violence, and she left him. And she took my sister and myself and went back to Auckland. And it was during this time that Mum found God through a woman she was working with, who took her to church, at an AOG church, and she got radically saved. And then my sister and I were not far behind. I was 8 when I gave my heart to the Lord at a church service at the Auckland Town Hall, which was an AOG church back then. It was very real, and I absolutely experienced the love of God. And I remember the song playing as I walked up on the altar call was that song, you probably know, Something Beautiful, Something Good. All my confusions he understood. All I had to offer him was brokenness and strife, but he made something beautiful out of my life.
Richelle, can I ask, when you say you found God, what does that mean, if we were able to put that into more detail for anybody listening that might not have had that experience before?
Yeah, sure. So I was in the church service and listening to the pastor talking, and I started to cry. The things that he was talking about really for an 8-year-old, seemed very real, which I guess is kind of unusual for an 8-year-old. And he just said, if some of the things that I've been talking about, I can't remember his exact words, but he said, if you want to know Jesus and have a relationship with him, raise your hand. And I did. And, I still remember quite clearly that I just started crying and, unexplained. You can't explain it when you're an 8-year-old. Why are you crying? Why do you feel so emotional? And I just did, and I just knew I wanted to do that. And so the town hall where we were sitting, I don't know if you know the Auckland Town Hall, but we were right up the top, up in the gods, they call it. And so I and my sister, both of us, put our hands up and we both walked.
On the same day?
Together, yeah.
That's cool.
She
That's
was
really
10 and
neat.
I was 8, and we walked all the way down all of the stairs by ourselves without our mum, and up the front on this altar call, both of us crying.
Yeah.
And, it was a really beautiful moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, very real.
That is amazing.
At the time, yeah.
That is so cool, Richelle. I just want to ask if you were able to reconcile, like, you, your sister, and your mum with your father after you were saved, because you guys had left him at that point. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. My mum, after getting saved, she heard like an audible voice from God saying, "Go back to Ken." That was my father.
Wow.
And she did, even though she really didn't want to, because it had been pretty tough. But she did. She was obedient to God, and she went back to him. And he, she prayed for him, and they obviously had some counselling and were trying to restore their marriage.
Yeah.
He wasn't coming to church, and she continued going. And then he got invited to go to a full gospel businessman's meeting. It was a friend of my mother's, I think, at the church that she was going to, or that we were going to, who invited him. And so he went, and he had a similar experience to what I had. And he, the guy that was speaking said, if you want to know Jesus, to put your hand up. And I remember him saying, I don't know what happened, but I saw my hand up in the air and I couldn't control it. So
I love that. It's like a spiritual reflex.
Yeah.
We need God, and your body just reacts to it sometimes.
Yeah.
How long was the distance, like the split between you guys leaving your father and then her hearing that call back to him from the Lord?
Yeah, I think they were separated for about 6 months.
Okay.
Yeah, and in that time she heard God. She got saved, and, went back. So, about 6 months. And then, so I was 8 when I became a Christian, and then Mum and Dad got back together, and for 2 years he was sort of obviously on this journey of, questioning everything.
Yeah. So he would have seen this full transformation, not just with his wife, but with his 2 daughters as well.
Yeah.
And going, whoa.
Yeah, things were really different over that period.
Wow.
The fighting had stopped, and it was just so much better.
I saw it was a statistic on if the father becomes saved or goes to church, it's a 96% chance that the rest of the family will attend church.
Yeah.
Oh.
And if it's the mother, it's a 63% chance that the rest of the family, and then if it's a child, it's a 14% chance.
Yeah, amazing.
So, it's pretty cool to be, your mum going to church, taking the kids to church, and it's almost like you add that all together and it's 100%.
Yeah.
God's going to pull through, eh?
Yeah. Well,
Cool.
we were all praying for him, and so many other people were as well. So, he didn't stand a chance, really, did he?
I love that.
But, the story doesn't end there, because 2 years later, as I was saying, he went to this full gospel businessman's meeting and put his hand up, and he became a Christian at that point. And for the next week, 7 days, he just was crying, right throughout the day, and apologising to Mum for the way that he'd behaved and the way that he'd treated her and us. And, he was just, broken, and God was obviously doing some true repentance. Yeah. He was just a mess, and God was obviously really doing a work of healing in his heart. And anyway, it was amazing. I remember that being a time of lots of cuddles, lots of talking, lots of apologies, and praying together, and it was amazing. And then it was. I'm going to read this out, because this is hard to say, even now, after all these years. We were living in Auckland, and Dad was flying for a small commercial airline at the time. And the night of October the 31st, 1977, was one I'll never forget. I remember Dad standing in the hall and saying goodbye, and then he was gone. And that night, his plane had unexplainable engine failures, and his plane crashed into the sea off the coast of Wanganui. And they found some of the wreckage, but they never found his body. I was 10 then, and we got the phone call that night that his plane had gone down, and Mum rang our pastor, and he came round. It was a really hard time for us. And my mother was amazing and really strong, and our church was incredible and really gathered around us. And, I remember sitting around in the room over the next few days with all these visitors and people coming around and just praying that they would find, we were hoping, maybe he'd got out and he was on a life raft somewhere. But they never found him, and it was tough.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was a tough age to lose your dad. I mean, it's never a good age, but 10 is a really difficult age. When you're just sort of coming into puberty and really needing your dad, and your dad's role is to affirm your identity and tell you you're beautiful and you're clever and I'm proud of you and you can do anything. And I didn't have that during those years, so it was really difficult. We were in a great church, and I was in a good youth group, but I was just really trying to find who I was and where I fitted in.
It's amazing though how God had restored the whole family together.
It was incredible.
He knew he knew what was going to happen, so he has a plan, and he's restored your family. Yeah, he did. So you had amazing years.
We did. We had 2 great years, and it was amazing. And Dad was like a different person, and I saw Mum and Dad's marriage in a really good place. So that was a great thing. And then so throughout my teenage years, I tried pretty hard to, find, I guess, as I said, my identity. And I got to about the age of 16 trying to be a good girl. And, then I just kind of lost the plot a little bit, went a bit wild and crazy for about 3 years, and did a whole lot of stuff, stopped going to church and just went wild. Had, quite a few relationships and just got into the whole scene of partying and drinking and, doing really stupid things. and really messed up my life quite a lot. And, I got to a point where I just...
Was this your late teenage years?
Yeah, this
16
is... From 16, I stopped going to church.
Yeah.
And just really went wild.
Yeah. Did you stop for a reason of... Was there worldly temptation? Was there, I just don't want to go to church anymore? Was there, I want to live my life?
All of the above, I guess.
All of the above.
Yeah. It was that. It was, there was a lot of temptation. I had a lot of friends that weren't Christians who were out there doing things that, looked quite cool. And I thought, well, I'm going to go and try that. And so, I did that for about 3 years and just really did some things that were stupid and, that, were not good choices for my life. And I got to the age of about 18 and my life was actually a real mess. And I dropped out of school and... I just really was not in a good place. I was losing weight. I was doing drugs, and I was doing things where, I would find myself sort of passed out in places and think, how did I get here? What is, and then I got to a point where I just thought something has to change. But the funny thing was through all of that I thought that I was still a Christian. I would, tell myself I'm still a Christian, I'm okay, and I'm going to make it, if I die, I'm going to heaven. I had a friend who was, she was a really good friend that I'd actually led to the Lord when I was 13, and she had been a really great friend. She'd been really faithful throughout all my crazy years, and she could see what I was doing and how messed up my life was. And she said, Richelle, why don't you come to this youth group camp? And I was sort of like, youth group camp? I don't think so. But, I knew that something had to change, and I'd reached this point where I thought, gosh, my life is a mess, and it can't get much worse, and I have to do something. And I said, okay, I'll go. And so I went along to this combined youth group camp. I think it was called Crossroads, and there was a speaker, Ray Comfort. Is quite.
Oh, you had Ray Comfort.
Yeah, Ray Comfort was the speaker there, and he was talking about, just not compromising. Basically, he was talking about, if you think, he was just sort of telling my life story. If you think that you're going to make it, you're not. And he said that scripture about, not being hot or cold, because if you're lukewarm, I'll spit you out of my life, out of my mouth. And it was like somebody punched me in the stomach, and it suddenly became really real. And I thought, that's me. I'm actually fooling myself, and I'm actually not really a Christian at all. And he will spit me out of his mouth. And so he gave this invitation to come and get your life right with God, and I was like the first person up on that altar call. And I was 19 at that point, and that was obviously the major turning point in my life. And
I love it how every time, like we've heard, it's like a universal thing, but when we present ourselves to God, we don't have to go and get ourselves clean and get off the drugs and get off the partying wagon and get off all that. It's come as you are, and I will wash you. And that you weren't ready to. I don't know. A lot of the time, I think we believe, I'll go to church or I'll go to God when I've cleaned myself up a little bit. But there's real power, and it's very biblical to come as you are,
totally.
And let God do the rest. And I love how you've done that. I mean, when you were 8, going to the front, fully surrendered to the Lord, and then again at this youth camp, and God meets you each time where you're at. And it's a powerful thing.
Yeah, so powerful, really. And life-changing, that, he takes us just as we are in our absolute brokenness and just loves us.
Yeah.
There's nothing better than that.
So that was a turning point. You were doing lots of partying and drugs and really stuck in the world, more or less, thinking that you're enjoying it, but you wake up knowing that there's a hole, and the hole seems to get bigger and bigger, but only God can fill that. You can try it with anything else, but only God can fill that hole. So was that the moment that you turned and ran straight hot for God?
Well, it was. I absolutely did, and I went back to church and youth group and really, cleaned up my act, I guess you could say. And I moved back home with my mum.
So you had moved out?
Yeah, I had. I'd gone flatting.
Oh, I see, yep.
It was... Yeah, it
was this through like uni? Did you do university or anything?
No,
you
dropped out of school.
Dropped out of school.
And I just went and got a job. Yeah.
Did the whole gap year?
Yeah, I didn't do uni at that point.
Yeah.
I was just, actually on too much of a crazy journey to be able to even focus on anything like that, I think. But yeah, so I moved back home with my parents, my mum, and she'd remarried, and had 2 more children. And so I moved home, and I was going out with a guy at that point when I had recommitted my life, and he wasn't a Christian, and it was really hard to end that relationship. And, when you're in a physical relationship, it's very hard to end that. And, even though I was wanting to live my life for God, it's like that. Do you know that verse in the Bible that says, where Paul says, the things that I want to do?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. I don't do. Yeah. And the things that I don't want to do, I end up doing. And that was that situation.
Yeah.
And so, I ended up getting pregnant, and my mum said, you have to get married. And so it was your classic shotgun wedding, and I got married at 19. Was really young.
Yeah.
And and he did come to the Lord, but he was sort of on and off for years, and it was a really difficult marriage because we were unequally yoked, and I was really wanting to live my life for God and be serious about that, and he wasn't. And so, even though we tried, we had counselling, and, we did everything, I think. Well, I certainly did everything that I could to keep that marriage together. It didn't last. It fell apart. But we did have 3 beautiful children together, and they are such a blessing. But, he had an affair with a woman he was working with and left. And, that is a really horrible thing to have to go through.
Yeah.
Going through a marriage breakup, a divorce is probably one of the worst things that you can go through. So that was a really difficult part of my life. But God was there right through it, and I absolutely know that He was. And I just determined that I was going to hang on in there, even though it was, one of the most horrendous things to go through. And I remember a time where I was standing in the bathroom at my house going, just crying and going, God, I can't do this. It's too hard. And, I had my eyes closed. I was crying out to Him, and I had the sense that somebody walked into the room. Like it was a really tangible sense that somebody had just walked into the room, and I could feel them standing there. I could feel them brushing up alongside my shoulder, and I just opened my eyes and I turned my head to see who it was, and there was nobody there. But I know that it was God. I know it was Jesus.
Yeah.
And I closed my eyes again and just went, well, just overwhelmed and crying. And I just had a sense of him saying, you're not alone. You're not going through this on your own. I'm with you and I'm carrying you through this time. And it was the most real experience I've ever had of Jesus. And, I've never had anything quite like that again. And so, just another, I guess that's just another example of his faithfulness.
Yeah.
That you can go through really hard things in your life, like the death of a parent or a marriage breakup or something like that, but you can just have this experience of God, how he says in his word, I will never leave you or forsake you. And that's been so real for me that, I have been through some difficult things in my life, but God's faithfulness has been so real, just incredible.
That's so cool.
I love how the Bible says, for when I am weak, he is strong, and the way that I see that is when we're walking with Christ and the weight of the world gets so heavy that it brings us to our knees, and it's upon becoming to our knees that's when God meets us where we're at, and
absolutely.
And we want to get to that point. I've heard Ray Comfort, since you brought him up already, he said a cool quote that I seen on Facebook, which was, before you get out of your bed and let your knees hit the ground before your feet, and just
absolutely
essentially start your day on your knees rather than on your feet.
Well, that's what I did, actually. That's funny you say that, because that's how I got through those years of being on my own. I was a single mum with 3 young children. The youngest was 2 at the time. I had a 2-year-old, a 4-year-old and a 9-year-old. And, I was on my own, and they were tough years, but I would start my day every day. I'd get on my knees beside my bed and I'd just go, God, I need you desperately. I need you. And, I would just get this total download of peace. And I have to admit that those years that I was on my own, those 4 years, I had the most incredible, intimate relationship with Jesus, because when you're desperate for him and he's all you've got, it's so real, it's like, I have nothing but you, Lord, and I need you desperately. And he's faithful and he turns up, So I used to do that every morning and every night again, Lord, I need you desperately. And he did. He just used to turn up, incredibly. His presence, was there. And it was beautiful.
It's so good to let people know that's listening to this podcast. You might have gone through so much weight in the world, and you just think, it can't get any better. And that's when God shows up. That's the time when you got nothing to lose. Cry out to God. I mean, you got nothing to lose.
Yeah.
So if you're listening right now and you got nothing to lose and you just don't know where to go, ask the Lord to reveal himself. And man, he does.
He absolutely does. Yeah, he's good like that. So on with that story. So during that, I was on my own for 4 years, and my parents were running a YWAM base over on Great Barrier Island.
Oh, cool.
And they said, why don't you come over? Why don't you just come over? So I did. I packed up the house and the kids and everything, and I went over and I did a DTS, and
which is a discipleship training school for anybody listening. And YWAM also stands for Youth with a Mission. I don't know how many times we've said that on this podcast, but just in case this is your first episode, definitely do YWAM if you feel like you don't know where God's wanting you and you just got a spare 6 months. transformative, absolutely incredible course to do.
Yeah.
So,
I can't recommend it enough, because I was, at a point in my life where I was like, well, what shall I do now? And, God, I need a little bit of direction here. And my parents said, come over and do this DTS, and I did. And Great Barrier Island is pretty cool.
Is that DTS still there?
It's not, unfortunately, because they used to run a surfers DTS and the music and worship one, and I did the music and worship one, and it was great, but also used to go out surfing, which was a bit of fun as well.
That's really cool.
Yeah, really cool. So I went and did that with the kids, and it was just an amazing experience of really growing as a Christian. Like, I'd been a Christian since I was 8, and I was 29 at this point when my marriage broke up. So, I was 29 and went over and did that. And even though I'd been a Christian for that many years, just being in that real intense environment where it's just like you're in lectures all day long and then you have worship every night, I just grew so much as a Christian.
It's like a greenhouse, eh?
Yeah, it really is. It was just such a great thing to do, and I highly recommend it for anybody. So I did that and came back, and, I just was in a great place, and I was like, God, I just want to live my life for you, and, this is what I'm doing. And so I started running a ministry with YWAM, which was a performing arts ministry. And I did that, then decided to take myself off to university at that point, and I did arts management there. And, I was in a really great place, and I said to the Lord, I don't ever want to get married again. I'm just actually having a really good time doing what I'm doing, raising my kids, running this ministry. Church is great. I'd started running a connect group. We were and the kids at C3 and in Auckland, and was just having a really great time with the Lord and with my kids, and things were great. And I said, yeah, Lord, I don't want to get married again. But if you have other plans, of course, I'm open to that. But if there is somebody else that you have for me, then, that guy's going to have to really pursue me, because I'm not going looking. And sure enough, that's exactly what happened. Vincent came back from living in Australia and came to church, and I was on stage doing worship, and he came to church that day after being in Australia for, I think he'd been over there for 9 years, and the Lord said, I want you to come back to New Zealand because it's time to get married. And he came to church and saw me out there, and he, I think, was pretty interested. And he came up and introduced himself to me at church, and was super friendly, and not long after that came up again and spoke to me at church and said, would you like to go out for dinner? And I was just like, really shocked, didn't even know him. And I was very hesitant, especially, after going through a divorce. And I thought, I don't want to rush into anything again. So I was very hesitant, but he was quite persistent. And he definitely pursued me.
Which is what you asked for.
It is, exactly. And so I did. Went out for dinner with him, and 6 weeks later he proposed. And
you know, eh?
I know, that's what he said. He said, I'd prayed about it before I even asked you out.
Wow.
And I knew that you were the one. And
that's awesome.
Yeah.
I love that.
Amazing. And we got married pretty much a year to the day of him asking me out. And he's been amazing. He's never been married. He'd never been married before or had children, and he just is a really mature Christian, really stable and steady, and just the most faithful person, kind, and God just blessed me amazingly.
That is so
Vincent.
Cool. How many years have you and Vincent been married?
Yeah, we've been married for 20 years now.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's been amazing. I'm not going to say, we got married and lived happily ever after, because, that would be a lie. Everybody has challenges, and certainly, if you're a blended family, you have challenges, because, I had been used to doing things my way and raising my children quite well and doing a really good job of it. Thank you very much. And he had no experience. And so, we had to there were areas of compromise where I had to go, okay, well, I'll just bite my tongue and, yeah.
The grace of God's always there.
Amazing.
When he restores a marriage, like a relationship or anything like that, he gives you that grace to overcome it as well.
Absolutely.
Some people think, it would be impossible, to bite my tongue or anything like that.
Yeah.
And God just teaches us in the moment where we're at how to include him, if we include him into it.
Totally.
The yoke becomes light, the burden becomes light.
Yeah, and that's the thing, because we're both Christians and we're both committed to each other and to God and to the marriage. And so, you still have arguments. Everybody argues, but the thing is that we are committed to making this work, and we'll talk it through and we'll pray together. And, so that was the difference, that we were praying together. And, we've come a really long way, and, it's great. It's exciting to see what God, is doing through us, in us and through us. And, we've been running a Connect group for the whole time we've been married, 20 years, and we've seen lots of people get saved and healed and ministered to, and, just watching people grow as Christians. And, it's an amazingly humbling experience to see what God does through you. He's called us to come down here to Wellington. We moved down in October, and it was really clear that he wanted us to come. We came down to support our daughter and her husband plant a church, and
we should let anybody know which church that is in Wellington. If you're in Wellington, go to C3 Central.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yes.
So is there more than one C3 here?
Yeah, there is. There's one in Upper Hutt, but their one's in the city in Webb Street. So C3 Central Wellington.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
Georgia and Liam, James.
Yeah, shout out you guys.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Do you have any advice for a younger Christian maybe? Or something that you wish you would have known when you were, in your 20s? Just with the knowledge that you have now?
I think just saying yes to God is the best thing that you can do, and being obedient to him. And sometimes he asks you to do things which you don't really want to do, and they seem quite hard. And, they might be contrary to what the plans for your life are. But, if you just say yes to God, it's incredible, the blessing that you get. And the longer you live your life as a Christian, and the more you say yes and walk in obedience to him, the more you see the blessing of God. There's a passage in I think it's Deuteronomy. There's a Deuteronomy 28, and it talks about the blessings for obedience, and blessed will be your coming in and your going out, and blessed will be your fruit basket, and blessed will be it goes on and on and on, and it has just all of these different blessings that you will receive when you're obedient to God. And I think that's the key, just say yes, just be obedient and say yes to God. And,
I love that.
Blessed.
I do have to ask though, are you both more or less YWAM couples? Did Vincent do YWAM? Because you said he was such a mature Christian.
Yeah, no.
Often that spawns out of some sort of field like YWAM, or he was just like that.
Yeah, he didn't do YWAM. He grew up in a Catholic family that were really solid people, really good, salt of the earth people. So he grew up in that church, and he had faith. But when he went through university, was with the Navigators, and they're not, as far as I know, they're not spirit-filled, but they're very biblically
like
sound.
Theology and all that. Yep.
Really good theology. So he knew a lot. He knew a lot. He had a lot of head knowledge, I guess. But when he was 22, he said to God, I really need to know if you're real. He had one of those experiences of his own, when it's not just what your parents believe or what you've grown up with in church, but a real experience where I think he was working on a farm sharing sheep, and he said he was out there and he just said, God, I need to know if you're really real. And he had one of those amazing supernatural experiences where God just actually showed up, and he, one of those sort of tangible experiences like I had in the bathroom that night. He had a similar sort of a thing that you just can't deny. And he said he just got filled with the Holy Spirit at that point and spoke in tongues.
Wow.
Which was just amazing. He didn't go to YWAM or anything like that. He just had a very solid faith, and then when he was filled with the Holy Spirit, it just became very real.
So what happened after that? So you'd obviously, have you, in the story so far, you've moved to Wellington already?
We were in Auckland when we got married.
Yeah.
And we've only just been in Wellington for 6 months.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah, we moved here 6 months
So we're caught up
ago.
to date.
Yeah, we're all up to date now.
Wow.
That's it.
That's an incredible testimony. I love how there's it's restoration through and through is that testimony. You can't deny that God hasn't showed up at your darkest moments each time. It actually reminds me a lot of the footsteps, footsteps in the sand. So I'll just say it off the top of my head for anybody listening. If you haven't heard that poem, I highly recommend looking into it. But essentially there's a person who has a dream. And in the dream he sees his whole life, and he sees them in footsteps. And throughout the dream there's 2 sets of footsteps, his and God's. And he notices when he's looking through his life of footsteps on this beach that on the hardest points of his life, there was only 1 set of footsteps. And he got a little bit annoyed and just pressed God and said, Lord, why on my hardest points does it look like there's only 1 set of footsteps? Why did you leave me? And God responds and says, my child, that was when I carried you. And I really see that in your life, God's just been there when you needed him, and he's like that. He's not going to carry you through your life. He's going to let you make your own decisions and things like that. But as a good father, when you cry out and go, Lord, help, he's right there.
Yeah. And
I love how he's restored. You've got this amazing husband, Vincent, and incredible kids, and that moment with YWAM that solidified your faith and being able to hear the Lord's voice. And you've been running a Connect group for 20 years. That is amazing. The amount of people that obedience would have impacted alone, just a Connect group. That's true discipleship right there. Something that the Western world lacks, and you're doing that so well. Laura, did you want to say anything?
I was a little bit curious on what were the confirmations that God showed you to move all the way from Auckland to Wellington?
Well, there were 7 of them, funnily enough.
Wow.
Yeah.
7.
I did write them all down. Actually when Georgia and Liam asked us to come to Wellington, I immediately went, no. I really didn't want to go at all. And I was, I had bad memories of Wellington when I was a child.
Yeah,
and I
true.
thought, I really don't want to go back there. It was horrible. that was not a happy period of my life, and I didn't really want to revisit Wellington. I know it's windy and cold, and so I didn't want to go. So I immediately said no, and then I went, Vincent immediately said yes. But then I went, well, Lord, if you really want us to go, of course we'll go. But, you know,
it's
you're
a dangerous prayer.
Yeah. But, you know, you're going to have to actually give me, you know, write it in the sky, or, you know, give me a very clear sign, because otherwise I'm not going. As God does. He did. He gave me several signs, and they might not mean anything to you, but to me they were quite big signs. And the first one was I was sitting out on our back porch with some people who I didn't even really know. I'd sort of got to know. During the elections, we'd sort of got involved in a little bit of politics, and I'd met these people, and they were Christians, and they came round, and we're sitting on the back porch, and we were praying. We were praying for the nation and praying for government and stuff, as you do, leading up to elections. And this woman, out of the blue, said, "Oh, I just have this picture that the Lord is actually moving you. He's shifting you, and you're going to get a whole different perspective. See how you look out here at that mountain," because we lived in Epsom up in Auckland, and we looked out at Mount St John. But she said, "See how you're looking out at that mountain? He's going to completely shift you, and you're going to have a whole new outlook. I don't know if that means anything to you." And I was like, maybe it does. And then the next one, we had a Connect group, and one of the women in our Connect group said, "Oh," and I hadn't told anybody anything about this. One woman said, "Oh, Richelle, I just have this sense that you're moving out of Auckland." And I went, ugh. So there was a second one. And then there were just sort of things like that kept happening.
Yeah.
And then I went into a clothes shop and was telling this woman about how my daughter had asked us to go to Wellington, and I was praying about it. And she said something like, "I think you're meant to go." And I have a florist business, and it's called Flourish, but she didn't know this. And she said, "I really sense that you're meant to go and make Wellington flourish." And I went,
Wow. That's awesome.
"Oh, God, really?" And, you know, so there was just sort of sign after sign after sign.
Yeah.
Oh, and then my pastor, Fiona, and my son-in-law's mum said, "Why don't we do a little road trip down to Wellington and just suss out the land, and we'll pray and, you know, pray about that church plant." And so I went, okay. So we drove down there, and we stayed a night. And in the morning when I woke up, as I was waking up, you know, that sort of place between sleep and awake, I had this really vivid picture of a mountain, and it was looking down on houses, and there was a cross on top of the hill. And when I woke up, I told my friend, "Oh, I just had this dream. It was really, really clear." And she went, "Wow, that's really interesting." And then we drove to Brooklyn, where they were thinking about planting this church. And we got out of the car, and I looked up, and there was that mountain that I'd seen in my dream. And I went, "Oh my gosh, it's that mountain." And we drove up, we walked up the mountain, and there was it wasn't a cross, it was like a memorial thing on top of the mountain. And we walked up there, looked down, there were all these houses, and we started to pray, and there was a pohutukawa that was in full bloom on top of the mountain. It was really beautiful. And as we started to pray, a tui came and sat in the pohutukawa tree and started singing, followed by another one and another one and another one and another one, until the whole tree was just full of tuis singing, which was just really weird. And we were like, "Oh my goodness, this is weird," and, you know, goosebumps moment. And there was, you know, no denying that was like a Holy Spirit thing. It was definitely a God thing. And And as soon as we stopped praying, they flew away. And,
Wow.
it was just like, wow, so many little things like that kept happening until it was just, finally I went, okay, I get it. Okay, we'll go. And we put our house on the market, sold it, and the day that we sold it, we were standing there the day we put it on the market, we were standing at our house with the real estate agent, who was our eldest daughter. She sold the house for us, and the guy who was doing all the marketing, and he had a drone, and he sent the drone up into the sky, and like this flock of birds came along and just started flying around and around and around and around our property, and they were like hitting the drone, and he said, I've never seen anything like this before. It was just bizarre. And that was the final sign. That was like, I went, okay God, I get it.
Wow.
We're going.
That's so cool.
I know.
And it's cool to see how God speaks to different people, because some of those confirmations could only mean something to you and could mean nothing to someone else. And it makes sense because he's only talking to you because you're the only one who asked for that confirmation.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Because God knows how you tick. He knows what signs you're going to pick up on because he formed you. He knows how your mind works. And, man, to get your attention and to give you confirmation, it's not a hard thing for him to do.
Yeah.
And I just love that you're doing things in obedience, but you're also doing things with clarity. So you're not just going, hey, I think that God's telling me to go here with just an emotional draw. You're going, Lord, if you want this to happen, make it abundantly clear to me. And he does that. Yeah. And he does that in so many wacky ways as well. Like he knows how you work. Yeah. And he goes, Richelle's going to, she probably loves birds. I'm going to make sure that this one happens. And I'm going to make it really clear with a couple of verbal cues from other people. And I just love that, hey, how God just directs you. And the Bible says that, he's a light upon our feet and directing our path, essentially. And, it's just so good. Yeah,
amazing.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, thank you, Richelle, for joining the Jesus Magnet podcast. You've got a powerful testimony. It will go out to the world. And we saw this cool quote online today. It was just, we put it on the Jesus Magnet page, and we really like it. It's very similar to our normal Jesus Magnet quote, which is, your story could be the key to unlock someone else's prison. But this one was, your story could be the survival guide for somebody else. So that's why it's important to share your story, to share how God's spoken to you, to share, these are my trials, these are my Goliaths, and here's my stones, here's my David moments, and God pulled through. And just so cool to see that through and through your whole life. Such a restoring life. God is good.
God is so faithful.
Awesome. All right,
Thank you.
We'll see you next time on the Jesus Magnet podcast. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Jesus Magnet podcast. If you enjoyed this, make sure that you connect with us. Find us on Facebook, on Instagram, and if you want to support us, be a member of our coffee club, Jesus Magnet Coffee Club. See you next time on the Jesus Magnet.